So Israel is on the assault, on the offensive, you could say, as they have been for many months now. This time targeting Rafah. So during the Super Bowl, many folks were talking about interesting X had trending Patrick Mahomes, the quarterback, and at the same time, more people were tweeting about Rafah, but Mahomes was trending first. So shows a little bit of a bias there. But this has been going on, an intensified bombing campaign. There is talks about a ground operation in Rafah, this small village packed like Palestinians are packed like sardines here because they've been displaced from every other area, bombed all along the route to Rafah, now being bombed in Rafah. Many have been killed. The numbers, I think, are an undercount likely coming out of the pages of the New York Times. But you have William Burns and other players in the international realm, Arab countries, Qatar, etc., trying to work out a ceasefire deal, and there is none in sight. Not only this, but you have Josep Borrell, our favorite person in the European Union. He, the EU so-called foreign policy chief, he has come out publicly and said Netanyahu just doesn't listen anyway, so he's not really going to listen. So, Scott, your reaction to all the latest updates in Gaza and the larger Middle East situation that is being, of course, fueled by the U.S. and Israel?
Well, I mean, wow, where to start on this one? Do we start with a 4-year-old girl on a telephone to the Palestinian 911, saying that she's in a car? They'd already listened to her 15-year-old cousin phone in live and be murdered by the Israelis. You hear the machine gun fire, you hear the bullets hitting her body, and she's dead. So now this 4-year-old girl calls in and she says, somebody come and save me. Somebody come and save me. And then they send 2 paramedics. They coordinated with the Israelis and said, we're sending 2 paramedics. The Israelis said, okay. They did everything the Israelis asked them to do. And when the paramedics arrived on the scene, they were then killed by the Israelis. Their vehicle run over, set on fire, the body's burned, and the 4-year-old girl is dead. Is this where we begin, where the Israelis are using 4-year-old children as live bait to lure in paramedics to murder them? It's not unique. The Israelis do this over and over again. How about the doctor who's in surgery and the Israeli sniper shoots him while he's in surgery? How about the people trying to arrive at a hospital for medical care that are shot? The mother taking her child across the road, shot. The child wounded. This happens on a daily basis. This is literal genocide being carried out by the Israelis. It's murder of the most egregious form. And and then what we talk about, Patrick Mahomes. Look, I watched the Super Bowl. I'm not a hypocrite. I mean, I watched it. I wanted to watch it. I've been waiting for this sporting event. But I also understood that, while that was happening, what was going on in Rafah, was it done deliberately? I think so. I think the Israelis timed it so that America is distracted, so that the news cycle couldn't be generated. Because what they did was horrible. The Israelis have been dropping leaflets on the civilian population in Gaza, telling them to go to Rafah. That's where they'll be safe. So about 1.6 million of the Palestinians did go to Rafah. They're crammed in there. And now the Israelis start to take down the hospitals, attack the schools. And last night they bombed a mosque, and they killed hundreds of people. I mean, they ripped their bodies apart. We're talking about women, children, civilians. They dropped the bomb. They claim it was in support of an anti-terrorist operation that rescued 2 Israeli hostages. Well, let me put it this way. Delta Force and SEAL Team 6 are the 2 American preeminent hostage rescue forces in the military. Then there's the FBI's hostage rescue team. If they ran an operation where if they to rescue 2 hostages, they had to kill nearly 150 people, wound another 250 people, and kill 3 hostages, maybe 8 hostages total. There's 5 that are wounded. No one would call that a success. In fact, if you put those parameters out there, if you brief those parameters saying, Mr. President, we're going to launch a raid. When it's done, we'll have murdered 150 civilians, 200 wounded. We'll get 2 hostages back, but 3 are going to die and 5 more are going to be wounded, probably dead. The president would say, you're not doing the operation. It isn't going to happen. That's a failure. Yet the Israelis are calling this a success. It's not a success. It's murder, mass murder. Uh, the Israelis are getting away with it. Nobody's stopping them. Nobody, not the United States. The United States is the only nation that could stop them. We're not. The Egyptians, I mean, they're talking tough. We're going to rip up the Camp David Accords. We're moving 40 tanks to the border. We're moving some air defense to the border. But you really think Egypt's going to throw away the golden egg that's been laid to him by Camp David, the deal where where their military aid and their aid from the United States is directly linked to the aid that the United States gives to Israel. So Egypt isn't going to encourage the United States to stop giving aid to Israel because that affects their money. Egypt isn't going to rip up the Camp David Accords because that affects their money. That's their wealth. Egypt has never cared about the Palestinian people. One of the reasons why life in Gaza sucks so bad is that Egypt has been colluding with Israel to seal it off. And suddenly the world's saying it's up to Egypt to save the day. Egypt's not going to save the day. No one cares about the Palestinian people. The Jordanians don't. Hell, the king of Jordan was in the White House the other day, Super Bowl Sunday, and didn't, I was waiting for the what's that movie, Love Actually, the big Christmas movie where Hugh Grant's the British prime minister, and he has this scene where he's doing a press conference with the American president, and he just tells him off. You're not a friend. Boom, boom. I keep waiting for the Love Actually moment for somebody, some world leader of stature to sit there with Tony Blinken or the president or some American official and say, no, you suck. No, we're not doing this anymore. We're done. You're bad. You're not a friend. This isn't how it's going to operate. But nobody ever does it because that's Hollywood. That's fantasy. That's where people actually have a moral, that have a spine and moral courage. There's no moral leader out there right now. Saudi Arabia is making noises, but they're not going to do anything. Turkey's making noises, but they're not going to do anything. Iran, they're not going to do anything. Hezbollah, they're not going to do anything. I think the Palestinian people, the only hope they have is Hamas. Hamas continuing to resist. And by doing so, and by exposing the criminal nature of Israel, to create a reaction, to continue this reaction around the world, because the United States is never going to do the right thing in Palestine because of the Palestinian people. We don't care about them. We just proved it. Super Bowl Sunday. We were silent while 150 women and children were blown into tiny little pieces by the Israelis. We were silent. We didn't do anything. But we do care about the global South turning their back on us. This is what hurts. This is where American ambassadors are writing in saying, hey, we're losing the world. In October, we have the Brics forum meeting in Kazan in Russia under Russian leadership. And Brics is going to start becoming, first of all, they doubled in size from 5 to 10. The 10 new members are going to be there. They're going to talk about increasing the expansion, but they're going to start creating institutions that replicate what the G7 does, what the G20 does, institutions that allow now for foreign policy and economic policy to be coordinated amongst the BRICS members. BRICS is the global South. And so as Russia starts attracting the global South is taking a look at the United States saying, we don't want to have any part of this anymore. You guys are horrible, what you did here. That could be the impetus for the United States to do the right thing and stop Israel. Look, as long as we allow Benjamin Netanyahu to stay in power, and remember, we allow this to happen. We could terminate him today, right now. The president could pick up the phone and say, Bibi, you're done. You can't get rid of him. I'm a sovereign state. Well, you ain't sovereign enough because we will stop all the money. We will pull the plug on every deal we have. We will force AIPAC to register as a foreign agent. We will do a whole bunch of stuff that you don't want us to do, that none of your colleagues want us to do if you don't step down. We could make him step down today, right now, but we don't because we don't have the guts. We don't have the cojones to do that. But we might once the global South says, we're done. And BRICS is the leverage. BRICS is the leverage. So if Hamas can continue to hold out, continue to deny Israel military victory, and by resisting, and by the world seeing the crimes of Israel against the Palestinian people become even more politically relevant. Look, the Biden doctrine. I don't know. Did you read the Tom Friedman piece in the New York Times about the new, Biden doctrine. Um,
Oh no.
it talks about a new Palestinian state. You know, we really have to fight for it. Yeah, but Tom, what you used an interesting word,
Great.
demilitarized. How can you talk
Uh,
about a sovereign Palestinian state that's demilitarized? So what does demilitarized mean? It means that Hamas, who has won this great victory by withstanding the Israeli onslaught, has to step aside. That isn't
yep.
going to happen. So I don't think it's all over for the Palestinians, but I'm telling you right now, anybody who thinks that the Egyptians are going to be the cavalry, that the Jordanians are going to be the cavalry, that Saudi Arabia is going to do the right thing, you're waiting in vain. This is Hamas's fight. Maybe Hezbollah will step up to the plate. I don't know. They promised, but remember, Hezbollah is a political party now, not just a resistance militia. It's a political party that has to take care of Lebanon. And I think, Nasrallah understands that, while on the ground, Hezbollah can fight the Israelis to a standstill, even take the initiative, maybe seize the Galilee, that Israel will blow the living hell out of Beirut, blow the living hell out of Lebanon. And that creates a dangerous situation for Hezbollah, because right now Hezbollah is a party that has a reputation of being good at governance, meaning that they care for all of Lebanon. And if they get involved in a war with Israel that causes Lebanon, who right now is in a precarious economic condition, political condition, to be destroyed, then that puts the future of Hezbollah at risk. Everybody looks out for their own best interests. Nobody's willing to sacrifice themselves for the Palestinian people. So at the end of the day, the only hope Palestine has is the continued resilience of its population and the ability of Hamas to hold out.
Yeah, I think it's a good point too, what you brought up, Scott, about the varying reasons for inaction regionally. I mean, we've talked about on this program, of course, Ansar Allah, the Houthis, their heroic stand, which continues, although it's not front page news anymore. But that blockade continues. It's what they can do, and I think you bring up a good point about the axis of resistance. I mean, you're talking about a powder keg. Israel is not a stranger to potentially invading and bombing and laying waste to large segments of Lebanon. Syria knows what it's like to be under fire from Israel, because it is almost every other day in some capacity. Iran also understands its role and its position and what it means to be the top dog in that region for the United States and the West to eventually get to. We saw that earlier when you were on the program, and we talked about the potential for war with Iran. There are influential segments of the U.S. political class that truly do want that. So it is a powder keg for the axis of resistance side, and then with the other side, the maybe more compliant Arab countries or regional countries. I think this was underestimated maybe at the beginning. I think many people thought the situation is so dire. So, yeah, of course, Saudi Arabia and Jordan, they will take a stronger stance. But at the same time, many of these countries have been so deeply connected to, especially the United States, not to mention growing ties with Israel, but especially the U.S.'s influence that remains, even if there's Brics and all these great developments. It doesn't mean that something as sensitive as the Palestine question, something that is so monumental, would change the entire region. What happens there will change the entire region. So, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, these countries, their leadership, that they feel like that would be political suicide for them. What are the consequences? They're not thinking about the Palestinians; they're thinking about themselves. And so, I think you bring up a really great point there. But I'll kick it back to you if you have anything that you want to add to the situation for Gaza and Palestine.
Well, I don't want to say that the axis of resistance is feckless, because clearly they're not. We see Hezbollah engaged in a in putting continuous pressure, escalation of pressure on Israel along its border. And Hezbollah has taken some losses, and they've inflicted serious losses on the Israelis. But again, I think to step into war, this an existential conflict is a huge step, and it. I'm not saying it's impossible for Hezbollah to do that, but I'm saying that um, Hezbollah will not gladly go in that direction. Neither will Iran. Remember, Iran just normalized relations with Saudi Arabia. Both Saudi Arabia and Iran are now members of Brics. Iran is pivoting its economy for the first time in many decades. They've been able to get their economy positioned to overcome the strains put on it by U.S. led sanctions, Western sanctions. And so, for the Iranian people who've been promised this moment for decades, now it's time for Iran to flourish and to thrive and for them to have this economic, well-being that has been promised, for Iran to throw it all away. Because while the United States won't be able to defeat Iran, we can seriously blow up a lot of Iranian infrastructure, and we can set Iran back economically. And that creates the potential for domestic unrest. Every regime has to look out for its own best interests. And while the Iranians aren't going to be defeated by an American flotilla or American army, there is the possibility that, unrest can happen from within. Now, people who study Iran, I'm one of them. I tend to believe that there's a lot more resilience in the theocracy than the West gives it credit for. But it's still a gamble, and it's one that Iran doesn't want to take. The people have been promised a better life, and so Iran will hesitate before, throwing the dice down on the table and engaging decisively with Israel and the United States in a manner that will, trigger a response, a military response, which, while it won't defeat Iran, will hurt Iran. So I think there's a lot of hesitancy out there right now. The Houthi are about the only ones who basically say,
Nothing to lose. Nothing to
we've been
lose. Yeah.
doing this. We've been doing this since 2014. We don't care. We're doing the right thing here. But
Right.
the Houthi, they have limitations about what they can achieve.
Yeah.
And they will need Iranian support. If they're to escalate, Iran will have to provide them, newer generation of weaponry, etc. I'm just basically, again, it comes down to the pressure that can be put. There will not be a ceasefire as long as Benjamin Netanyahu is the prime minister. I firmly believe that, because he's equated a ceasefire with Israeli defeat. So as long as Netanyahu holds on to power, you're going to be seeing a continued escalation of military power. But even he understands that to trigger a conflict with Hezbollah would be not only devastating for Lebanon, but also for Israel, and that he would pay the price. So I think this selfish self-interest, which is the prerogative of every sovereign state, is the one thing that's going to prevent this thing from exploding out of control. What Netanyahu is hoping for is that the Palestinian people crack before the international support for Palestine becomes so great that the United States compels him to step aside. So we're in that kind of race. It's very risky. I mean, it's literally like they've emptied out powder kegs, and you got a bunch of books and matches there, and a bunch of arson inclined kids, flicking matches around. Match connects with the gunpowder, it's going up. But I do believe that there's enough adults in the room that understand the consequences of that, and they'll manage this escalation so it doesn't get to that route. The tragedy is 4-year-old Palestinian girls are going to be getting on the phone, calling in for help, and help is never going to arrive, because the Israelis are murderous sons of bitches who are committing the most horrific war crimes imaginable, and nobody in the world cares.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine also the decisions that you're talking about being made that where we can't be a party to, right? The decision for Iran or Hezbollah, these countries which there's a massive popular sentiment, not just worldwide, but it's been like this in the region for quite some time, a massive popular sentiment in solidarity with the Palestinian people. And with something like this going on, this literal genocide, to have to walk the line, toe the line, do only what is possible, but may not change the calculus of what's going on. I mean, I can't imagine what it must be like to be in that situation. And at the same time, I think you're right. It's so interesting. It feels like the axis of resistance has been the force that has been preventing the powder keg from exploding, while Israel, of course, the United States, have been lighting all the matches everywhere. And so it's been very interesting to watch that. And now, and maybe last question on this. Now you have William Burns there, and Scott, you know intelligence. He's there, of course. He's known also as sort of a more of a diplomatic character when it comes to intelligence operatives, leaders. Could you talk about what possibly he could be saying, talking about raising here, given the fact that all the reports are saying, yes, exactly what you're saying, Scott. Netanyahu, Israel, there's no progress there. Hamas, there's lots of progress. They were willing, as long as certain terms were met that are very meetable, very achievable. Like, for example, the cessation and withdrawal of hostile military forces in Gaza. That seems to be achievable. There's no gain here. So William Burns has been there for I believe it's been over a day at least. What do you think he's saying? What do you think is going on there in terms of from the intelligence perspective?
Well, he was brought in as the director of CIA not because of his extensive intelligence background. He doesn't have one. He's a diplomat. He was a very successful ambassador to Russia. He's the man who wrote the 2008 Niet means Niet memorandum, no means no, about the dangers of inviting Ukraine into NATO, the inevitability of conflict with Russia that would produce. He has a reputation. They call him, the master of the back channel. In fact, he wrote a book called The Back Channel, which is sort of his autobiography about the role that he played in doing these kind of back channel deals. And so he was brought in because the CIA in the Middle East has a role that goes beyond simple espionage or intelligence work. Especially with the Israelis and the Palestinians, the CIA became the trusted broker between the two. Where a CIA officer could meet with the PLO, meet with Fatah, and then go and meet with Amman, meet with Mossad, and get the security services to work with one another. The CIA actually built up a reputation and a body, a pool of manpower that had this experience. And so I think that's the role that he's playing right now. His job right now is to get the security services, because security services at the end of the day, they always talk to each other, no matter what. I mean, I was laughing. I was not laughing. Yeah, I was laughing about the Battle of Mariupol. I was speaking to Adam Delankhanov, the Chechen commander of the Chechen forces in Mariupol, and he talked about how he was in open radio contact with Budanov, the head of the Ukrainian military and intelligence, that they would coordinate with each other and talk to each other. And he said, Budanov's actually a pretty smart guy, a pretty capable guy, but you couldn't imagine this, but it happened. The intelligence people, the security people are always talking to each other because that's their job. And so I think Burns is there, trying to work the back channel, trying to, come up with a solution that's, we're not going to read about it, because the purpose of the back channel isn't to make headlines. The purpose of the back channel is to quietly go in there and get the ball rolling, get people talking, get things happening. Can he succeed? It's a big problem, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if Netanyahu stays in power. Then there's no chance for for a ceasefire, and the only way you're going to bring a peaceful conclusion to this is through a ceasefire. So what kind of deals can Burns cut? What kind of assurances can he give? At the end of the day, he's going to be limited by Israel, by Netanyahu. And so we'll have to see. I think everybody that he's talking to could make the kind of compromises necessary to get a lasting ceasefire in place, by punting down the road some of the more difficult issues, like what's the final status of Hamas politically? What's the final status of Hamas militarily? These are two, so-called game. The game doesn't go on if they're still there. But you can't make them go away when they're winning on the ground, when they're defeating the Israeli military, and when the Hamas is more popular politically than they've ever been. So I think Burns's job is to go in there and create carve outs and say, okay, this is an issue that will push down the road. This is another issue we'll push down the road. But what we need to do is get enough concurrence on issues we can agree upon so we can get a ceasefire, get the hostages exchanged for prisoners, and get humanitarian aid in, and bring the temperature down and tremendously about on this problem. And then once we do that, we shift it away from the battlefield to how do we deal now with these cutouts that have been identified, and then he can step aside and let the diplomats take over. But I think that's his job. His job right now is to shape the political battlefield so that there can be a ceasefire as soon as possible.
Thank you for tuning in to my latest video. I appreciate all of your support. This channel, however, needs your help. I am seeking to make this channel more sustainable in the long term and upgrade necessary equipment to ensure that this work continues onward and makes progress to give you all of the geopolitical analysis that you all deserve. For that reason, I'm asking you to become a member of my Patreon community at patreon.com/DannyHaiphong. You can find that link in the video description or in the pinned comment below. For whatever amount you choose to give, just know you are supporting independent media that you can't find anywhere else. Thank you so much, and I look forward to the next video.